Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, another very important topic, and that is about the future of Pakistan-US relations. Obviously, when we hear our National Security Advisor, Moeed Yusuf, he says that we really need to work together and promote bilateral trade. There should be investment coming in from United States of America, and that's the way to move forward. But having said that, there are a couple of very important I would say, incidents that happened during the last 2 decades. Afghan invasion and the Afghan withdrawal. Again, Pakistan was made the scapegoat. Trust deficit, again, is another very important area to be managed, I would say. As far as the dependency of our exports is concerned, primarily United States of America and European Union, these are the biggest trading partners. You can't lose those, you can't afford to. How to improve on those particular areas, that is something very important. United States of America, in fact, recognized Pakistan right after the independence. That was within the first 2-3 months. And ever since that, we have been in their camp. But latest development seems to be pretty interesting when we believe that the time to be, I'm not saying that we are in the other camp at the moment, the Chinese camp, but having said that now, one has to create a balance, an equilibrium between the two countries. Generally, it is thought that a step towards China means a step away from United States of America. Now, is this a correct statement? If so, how to move forward? And if not, then there is nothing to worry about. At the same time, you talk about the United States' strategic interest in the region. That is there, was there, and will remain there. And what should be the role of Pakistan now? Again, that is something very important. We talk about the current situation in Afghanistan. As we all know, it's very fragile. Nobody is recognizing the regime of the Taliban, and it is believed that around 60% of the population could be starved in the next coming months or perhaps weeks, I would say. Winter has already approached, things are changing, and there is no fund coming in from any other country. Pakistan, at its own level, they're trying their level best again to make sure that the Afghan brothers are looked after. There was this 5 billion rupee aid package announced by the Prime Minister, but that is nothing. One has to look into the real issue, and that means that China, Russia, including Pakistan and Iran, should really support this neighboring country. That is how things will get better in the region. What would be the future strategy of the United States of America in the region, especially in the perspective when we see that as far as India is concerned, they're very close. Now, India is the strategic partner of the United States of America in the region. What would be the role of India then? I mean, there are multiple questions, but at the end of the day, what matters to us is Pakistan should succeed, should overcome all the hindrances, all the problems, all the issues, and move forward. Now, to talk about that, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Air Commodore retired Basit Raza, who's a senior analyst. So thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on the show. And we also have with us Ambassador Naila Chohan. She's a senior diplomat. Ma'am, pleasure to have you on the show as well. And we also have with us from United States, Washington, Syed Muhammad Ali, who's an expert on international affairs and IR. Thank you so much, Mr. Syed Muhammad Ali, for your participation. Now, let me start off from you, Air Commodore Basit. A couple of very interesting facts are there, sir. The Cold War between the Chinese and the Americans, and then the latest, I would say, the talk that was held between the two premiers of China and the United States of America, Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Biden. And they believe that they should work together and they should move forward because these are the two economic giants, these are two military giants, I would say, and two competitors also, global competitors. Now, sir, when we see these two countries, getting into a Cold War, what is that supposed to mean for Pakistan? I mean, should we stay in one camp or should we stay in the previous camp of the Americans? How to sort of create that equilibrium, sir? Don't you think that is a real challenge for the current government and perhaps for the future governments also?
It's indeed a tightrope walking for Pakistan, but it's a matter of real politics. We have our own vital interests, and at the moment they are tied with Chinese. not at the moment, but since a very long time, because it has become pretty obvious over the past 6-7 decades that our relationship with United States had only been transactional. It was a love-hate relationship. It would have meteoric rise, suddenly it will rise to a peak and then certainly fall dead. So we have had those cycles repeatedly, and we have learned the lesson that Americans interact with us only when some of their interest is at stake. And their interest still lies in this region, because this pivot Asia policy that President Obama pronounced, it focuses their attention towards this region. And certainly so, naturally so, because two of their top adversaries, number one China and number two Russia, they lie in this region. So, that game would continue to remain on. It will remain on. And the conversation that you mentioned, it was polite between President Xi and President Biden, but President Xi was very clear that do not cross the red lines.
Absolutely.
And that shows the sort of gravity of the situation and what dynamics is playing in the region. So I would say that in my opinion, Pakistan would remain engaged with the United States. You just mentioned this delegation of congresspersons who visited, and NSA talked about it. He made it very clear that Pakistan's priorities have shifted now. We are not into geopolitics. So he is actually dissociated from, he's tried to dissociate himself from the politics of the region. And he also said that we want to focus on geoeconomics. This is something new. I do not know whether it's a policy matter or it is just an idea for the American senators. But again, Pakistan has to play it safely, because we know that United States is a strategic partner of in strategic partnership with India. But for us, as far as we are concerned, United States is an important player in world events, and more specifically so on its influence on the financial institutions.
Oh yes,
is something which is important, and which cannot, we have to play ball. I mean, we can't sort of totally disconnect with them. So this is the game that we must, as long as we understand that our vital interests are linked with Chinese, and we continue to work with the United States as best as possible, this is in our interest. And this is what the shape of the things in future is, I see is happening, because as we know that Mr. Biden has not yet talked to our Prime Minister. So this shows what importance they are giving to us. And so we should understand our limitations and what is the room for us to play, and play in that limited space as best as possible. This is my opinion about this present situation.
All right, coming to you, ma'am. Now, obviously, when we talk about, or rather even Basit have also talked about it, that from a geostrategic approach to geopolitics to geoeconomics, ma'am, don't you think that you have to settle down the first two first and then move to the third? Because we talk about geoeconomics, ma'am, it's not possible unless until issues are sorted out. Yes, you have a great potential to sort of do a lot of trade with the Central Asian states, but it has to be a mandatory support for the Afghan government and the Afghan people, so that peace prevails there, and then you can do that. Similarly, in so many other cases, ma'am. So is this approach, ma'am, sort of viable for the moment, or there could be a lot of issues in there?
I think we should look at the government's statement in its right context. When they're talking about shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics, it's not about not being interested in the regional politics. It's about understanding the core issues, that nowadays the game is economics. And it's economics that drive countries together, and it's economics that reduce interest. So it is a positive way of deepening engagement. I would not interpret it as not being interested in the geopolitics. We are very much interested in the geopolitics, but earlier on we were, because of being so obsessed with the geopolitics, were embroiled in those blocks and, CENTO, CETO, and all those experiences that we have had.
Yes.
Now there's a reality check that every country pursues its own national interest, and it is now, the game is economics. And even if you engage with the Americans also talk about it, that they're interested in engaging with Pakistan, but Pakistan has to put its economic house in order. So if the government is focusing on that, I think we should appreciate that rather than misinterpreting it.
Do you think it's been misinterpreted, ma'am?
In this context, yes, because I think the government is moving positively towards economic engagement, because that's what gives substance to the relationship. Otherwise, why would people be interested in geopolitics? Is a very 20th century concept. Now we are coming in 21st century. We have to move with the world. The international order is changing. The world order has changed. And we have to move with the dynamics of the international system. We can't just, be in the 20th century syndrome of the blocks and this, that, and the other. Of course, we are engaging with the Americans. We have very strong relations with China, and we are not putting ourselves in a position where you have to pick and choose.
Ma'am, if I may ask you one question, let's talk about India. The way the Indians engage the Americans and the Russians, and even the Chinese. They're balancing it so well. Look at the trade, between India and Russia. India and China is hitting around 100 billion. India and United States of America. But ma'am, they are being very successful at various levels. When it comes to Pakistan, ma'am, the arm twisting agenda or the formula is still there, whether through FATF or through IMF or through World Bank. Now, don't you think it should come to an end now? And Americans should realize that Pakistan has been a non-NATO ally, and they have paid the price, and they're still paying it. So perhaps it seems that the morality, ethics, values and norms, they do not exist in today's politics.
Well, you have made a few points. Let's go one by one.
Let's do that.
Now, if you are comparing with India, I think we should stop doing that. We have to develop our relationship independent of others. India is 5 times your size. India has a different level of diaspora abroad.
Correct.
Half of their diaspora is in the decision making of these countries.
There you go.
So let's not compare ourselves with them. Let's look at our own reality and work on that. Because if you keep on comparing yourself, then you will unnecessarily put yourself in a position which is neither in your favor nor in your, strengthening of relationships. So let's look at our relations with, for example, United States, independent of that. India has a history of relationship with Russia, Soviet Union. Even now they're getting arms from Russia.
Yes.
And it doesn't affect their relationship with United States because of various factors. So it's a different paradigm altogether. Let's not confuse ourselves with that. We have to now be open-minded about it, and we have to look at our own dynamics, and we have to create our own narrative, not be obsessed with others.
Got it, ma'am. Coming to you, Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, one point that is very important. Let's talk about post 9/11. The Americans invaded Afghanistan, and ever since this AFPAC formula or the approach was known to us, India was sidelined in this particular regard. And at the same time, what we heard that, okay, do more, give us the airspace, give us your bases, we want the aerial route, we want the land route, and Pakistan did whatever it could do at that time. We were not even paid a lot of money which we were supposed to get because of that sort of support, the support fund as we call it. So right after that, when the Americans left Afghanistan in haste and hurry, we all know what happened after that. Still Pakistan is blamed. We have been made the scapegoat. Pakistan and US relationship is always seen through the prism of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, even now, don't you think this, whatever we have done, good, bad or ugly, That's there, that is the past, that is history now. But whatever you're doing now and the future course of action is going to determine how these two countries get along or move forward. But so one major element is about the trust deficit. Whether you talk to their generals, they would always say that, we did not share certain information with Pakistan, which we used to. Now things have changed. The trust deficit is the main problem. Is it, sir?
Well, I mean, the trust deficit has certainly increased, and I mean, post 9/11, there were a few things that eroded that trust. I mean, there was the whole nuclear non-proliferation issue. There was the alleged distinction made between TTP and the Afghan Taliban. Then there was the whole OBL instance, right, and other cross-border sort of collateral issues. So in my view, I mean, this articulation of the geoeconomic, should have happened, 20 years ago, when we actually had a little bit more leverage. And I say this to you, having worked, Faisal, over the last couple of years with a prominent DC-based think tank, where me and my co-author got at least a dozen signatories from the think tank community, very senior people, from including assistant secretaries of state, ambassadors, people from the State Department. They all co-signed, leading academics and Pakistan experts in Washington, D.C., asking for a broadening of the relationship in the lead up to the Biden administration coming into power. Subsequently, we repeated this exercise and actually, were providing justifications and opportunities for the geoeconomic, harnessing the geoeconomic potential, of the Pakistan US bilateral relationship, and by implication easing the sort of great competition which is going on in South Asia. And there also we had I believe 16 signatories, including senior retired people from the military, from the government, the leading analysts of the country. So having worked with these people, having solicited their opinions, and watching the realities as they've been unfolding now, and even now, I'm doing a paper on the China relationship with the United States Institute of Peace. And the back and forth that we are having on that right now, I think that there is very little appetite presently within the US. And, so long gone are the days of trying to do an ROZ, which was a interesting idea on which not enough homework was done within Pakistan, and it kind of made it through the legislative process in the US. So the ROZ was the idea that American markets would provide special access to goods made jointly by Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? And the idea was that it would help stabilize Afghanistan. It would help the Pakistani government work more closely with the then Ashraf Ghani government. And there were a variety of reasons why that didn't happen. And the US also legislature didn't pass that law. So long gone are those kinds of days. However, there are, still possibilities, but much more humble and modest possibilities in my view, rather than this kind of grand, tapping into the geostrategic sort of potential of Pakistan. I think that's just in the current atmosphere, at least where I am sitting and the people that I talk to, as much as one would wish it, I think that would be, that would not be realistic.
All right, that's a very interesting comment. I mean, you said there's no appetite there, but sir, we still believe that the Americans, should work with us, and we are looking at broadening the overall engagement with the Americans. Whether you talk about the Pakistani military officers who go abroad, especially to the United States of America for training, for various courses also. America is still the second largest supplier of the military equipment to Pakistan after China. And so much has been, going on. But one important point, sir, that needs to be discussed, that needs to be highlighted, is that Pakistan was used as a tissue paper. I mean, a lot of people used to say that the moment the Americans would use you, they'll just use you as a tissue paper and they'll just throw it away and they'll move on. So whatever sacrifices that Pakistan has given over a period of time, we always say that, over $130 billion worth of economic loss. We talk about 80,000 plus people who lost their lives because of, as they call the war on terror. And the entire nation was in a very different kind of a mindset during those times. But now, sir, do you believe that is it possible for Pakistan to survive and to grow without the support and the, as they call the Ashirwad of the Americans? Because, sir, if you look at the history from 1947 onwards till almost 2018, 2019, United States of America has given us almost $78.5 billion in various forms, in the form of military equipment and so on and so forth, sir. So our dependence on the Americans, I mean, that has been there. So if you remove that United States of America part, sir, out of this future course of action, do you see Pakistan, moving in the right direction, or you think there has to be some sort of a correction in the course when it comes to the balancing of the relationship between Pakistan, China, and Pakistan, United States of America?
Well, of course, I mean, we have to try and pursue, bilateral relationships simultaneously and try to not get into a Cold War 2.0. I mean, even on trade right now, I mean, although the FDI coming into Pakistan now is predominantly Chinese, but, the US still remains the largest trading partner. So I think the design, even in the US, they would not entirely sever ties. I mean, I do think that, I mean, in a sense that the chicks came back to roost for Pakistan also. I mean, given our policies in the 80s and 90s. So it's not entirely, America arm twisting Pakistan. I think that's, I mean, all nations develop their own narratives, but looking at it from afar, I mean, it seems that there is still, despite the difference in perceptions on both sides, where there might be finger pointing on both sides, blaming each other for for the ground realities, there are still feasible opportunities for cooperation, right? So I mean, if you look at the Islamic State, I mean, and this is perhaps a point I can come to later, that is one group which is, India, Bangladesh, China, the US, Iran, Pakistan, everyone, and the Taliban. I mean, the Taliban are being ultra conservative and not being diplomatic because they fear attrition, right? They fear that their hardliners are going to walk on over to the Islamic State Khorasan. So that is a group that kind of everyone can cooperate on. And I mean, I posed this question via Marvin Weinbaum to Moeed Yusuf a few days ago when he was giving a talk at the Middle East Institute. So I think those are the types of entities that one can try and build regional regional counterterrorism operations around. And similarly, there are also economic opportunities, but they have to be more precise. I mean, it's going to, it has to be win-win, and it shouldn't be elite captured, as a lot of cooperation in the past has been, because America is also ready to do business, but then ultimately who's benefiting, right? I mean, just attracting money into Pakistan doesn't necessarily alleviate poverty or lead to long-term sustainable prosperity. So, I mean, but there is room to think about those issues for sure, even today.
So when you talk about the US strategic approach for the region, sir, now it seems that the most important country, which was Pakistan, I mean, we have been sidelined. What are they looking at, sir? Just India or what?
I mean, in India, as far as Afghanistan goes, I think the US also realizes that, India has very limited traction, right? I mean, with the Ashraf Ghani government gone and, having bet on Ashraf Ghani, I mean, even Ambassador Khalilzad was recently sort of talking about that here. Um, I think Pakistan remains important for a variety of reasons when it comes to long-term stabilization in Afghanistan. But
Do
there
the
is, I mean,
Americans
for
want
the
that stabilization
US,
in Afghanistan now? That is the question.
sorry, what's the question?
Do you really think that the Americans, they believe in long-term settlement in Afghanistan? Don't you want that the current situation, this chaos, the civil war-like situation
Yeah.
suits their agenda?
I mean, yeah, managed chaos, right? I mean, that's the other thesis. Um, but I think that right now the intelligence reports coming out about the Islamic State and its gains and its presence in all the provinces of Afghanistan, I think that scares the West. I mean, they have spent a lot of money over the last 20 years, whether wisely or foolishly, right? So there's this legacy issue. Because if there's another attack on foreign soil perpetrated, by a group like the Islamic State Khorasan, right, that means trouble. I mean, it further emboldens and creates further chaos in the Middle East. So I think that there is an imperative to, but there's a dilemma at the same time. So there is humanitarian aid going in,
All right.
through the UNHCR, etc. But they, till the Taliban also show more flexibility, it's difficult, for the international community to recognize them.
All right. So, question, previous one.
Yes, I personally think that here again, there's no bilateral interest. There doesn't seem to be any something which is affecting us and them directly. It's still through Afghanistan. They have interest in Afghanistan, and all this money and aid which is being channelized through the NGOs and UN forum, it is in that direction. So this is a very limited space for Pakistan, in which somehow or the other interest of Pakistan and United States converges. And apart from that, I don't see much interest. I mean, if Americans want to move in that direction, just a week back, you must have read that news that Tony Blinken, he has
Issued a statement
that Pakistan and Taliban are violators of religious freedom, and they have designated Pakistan as CPC, which is a country of particular concern. So this kind of things do not show an atmosphere where American wants to play ball. Their only interest is in the situation in Afghanistan, and as was pointed out, that these groups like IS, Khorasan, etc., they want some action against them, and they want Pakistan to play a role. And we have our own case with TTP. But now we have actually moved in a different direction. There was a time where we want to eliminate TTP, this Tehrik-e-Taliban, Pakistan and other groups. But now we are moving into a direction of a dialogue.
You're ready to negotiate with them.
Because actually this is our own interest. Why should we go and fight others' war, and why should we go into these battles on someone else's dictates? So this is a right course for Pakistan at the moment, and if these talks sort of make a headway, then I think the American interest would remain. They want to handle Afghanistan in their own way, but as it is very often said, that all roads to Kabul go through Islamabad. So at one stage or the other, they will have to realize the role of Pakistan, which we have already played in the past, and it's only now that since they have gone out of Afghanistan with lot of sort of bad name, they don't want to sort of look in eye to eye with Pakistan on that account, because they feel that Pakistan has a part to play in the debacle for Americans which took place in Afghanistan. So this is the atmosphere, and as I said that I don't see any positive and forward movement in US-Pakistan relations at the moment. But Our task is only to keep engaged in dialogues and try to look for rooms where we can interact in the interest of our countries.
Now, ma'am, another very important year, that was 2011. I think that was the beginning of this, issue of trust deficit. Salala incident, ma'am, if you remember, around 30 soldiers were brutally killed by the American forces. Raymond Davis issue, ma'am. Again, we caught a spy, red-handed, who eventually ended up killing 3 civilians, but he was, again rescued by none other than their previous Secretary of State. And then Mr. Chohan. And at the same time, ma'am, I think the most important issue was the killing of Osama bin Laden on the 2nd of May 2011 again. Ma'am, this year and these 3 incidents, ma'am, do you think these are the real factors to bring in a lot of mistrust and the differences between these 2 countries, ma'am, whether at the military level or the government level or otherwise?
Thinking in the recent history, yes, these were very important. But since our relationship, which you were alluding to in the beginning, there has always been this trust deficit. Why did we leave CENTO and CETO? Because we were disgruntled. We were disgruntled because we thought that this alliance was to support us. But it didn't happen. So we left it. We keep on moving forward, but we keep on learning from the interactions that we have had. The concept of AFPAC, which we had resented and rejected, but it has stayed since the American presence in Afghanistan.
That's absolutely correct.
And even now, they left perhaps with a sense of humiliation, because the agenda that they stated.
Their mistakes, their own decision making, which
Yes.
went wrong, why to blame Pakistan for everything?
Well, when you do something wrong, you have to find someone to blame. You can't accept that
Blame
it is
that
your
country
mistake.
which has paid the most, which has suffered the most, which has been the actual non-NATO ally, who's been so helpful for 20 years, ma'am, 2 decades.
I know, Faisal.
Is this
but
what we get in return?
देखिए, you have to understand that we are a sovereign state. We are not a tissue paper that anyone can throw here and there. We have a relationship which is long, which is which has checkered, of course, but we have to be positive and we have to keep engaging, and we have to find avenues where we can strengthen our relationship. You can see in COP26, they had a talk. We are interested in having discussions on climate change. We are interested in having discussions on health. We are interested in counter-terrorism, which is a mutual interest. There is a convergence of interests as well, but we should think and look at ourselves as an independent sovereign state. We should not look at ourselves as a baby who anyone can push here and there. We are not. And we have a certain status in international community. We have played a very important role despite our size. We are not a very big country, but we have always had a very strong presence, and no one can push you around. What we need to do is put our own house in order, and now particularly our economic house in order. We are doing good things, but we have a long way to go before you can talk to anyone on equal terms. I don't think we should be obsessed with these things, how America is looking at us, how is India behaving. We shouldn't be bothered about it. You look at China. They had a very difficult time in their history, but then they closed themselves, they built themselves. When they became strong enough, they opened doors and they started interacting with the world, and now there are fears by the United States that it might surpass the American might. So these are the lessons we need to learn.
And Chinese are indeed ahead in so many areas, ma'am.
Indeed, and we
I
have to
was
follow.
surprised to know even in the area of artificial intelligence.
Exactly. So we have to now look at ourselves, put our own house in order, whether our political house or economic house. Once we do that, nobody can use you as a tissue paper.
Ma'am, another very important fact. Let me put this question to both of you. Let me start off from you, sir. CPEC, bone of contention, sir, between Pakistan and America. Why? The Americans don't want us to grow, glow, and become a powerful country, sir?
No, it's not against us. It's against China, because they see China's
Why
might
to pinch us
multiplying.
then?
Because we are the flagship project. It starts from here. One of the route actually without
Comes down all the way from north to
yes,
south.
it's the belt doesn't connect with the road. So that's what our importance is. This is what it is. Although some of the European countries, the NATO allies, have seen that the importance of CPEC. Italy has joined, and
So many European countries.
That's
yeah.
right. So, but America is America. They are the Chaudhries of the world. So they will not sort of see this reality. Otherwise, I don't see there's any harm in sort of this project, which is of connecting countries. China is going to benefit because China is the major powerhouse and producer of goods and things. So if all these countries are connected by road, China would be a major beneficiary. But look at the Chinese investment, and they haven't used a bullet. They have actually put their money and sort of work for the progress of the countries through which these roads are passing. So that's a model for America, because instead of browbeating and bombing the countries and putting the soldiers and boots inside those countries, it's better to put your money and work for the well-being of the country, that country, and your country itself in return. So this is a good model to follow. And mind you, now even the Americans have started thinking on those lines, and they have also initiated their own sort of those arrangements are slipshod. They are not of that magnitude which the Chinese have put
Along with their lives, they want to spend
Exactly.
around $40 trillion.
That's right.
That's a huge money.
But in
That's it.
CPEC, I must add that it's not just China benefiting, we are also benefiting.
Each country.
Lot of our development, less developed areas are getting development. So it is a mutually beneficial relationship, and we have to play our role in
Ma'am,
that.
do you believe, because you remained an ambassador there as well, ma'am, the Chinese do understand the kind of pressure Pakistan is going through because of this?
Chinese understand that, and China itself is undergoing pressure also, because as our panelist here stated, it is not against Pakistan. It's basically to contain China, and that's where Indian and American interests converge. But the Indian interests are not as much as countering China as much as it is to prevent Pakistan from benefiting. So Indian reasons for opposing CPEC may be different from the American.
Their government opposes it, their private sector really wants to join it.
So be it so. That doesn't mean we are going to stop. We have to promote our interests and our relationships in our own benefit. Let's not worry about what others are thinking and doing. Let's worry about what we can do, and we should look at it in a positive way, that CPEC is going to help us. That's why we have agreed to it, and we will continue with it, and we have told the Americans also that this is beneficial. If you could come up with a plan like that, we would welcome it as much. But let the Americans, now they're talking about B3W and all that, it's just a concept. I don't know how it's going to come on the ground. But as far as CPEC is concerned, it's
a
on the
reality,
ground.
it is already there.
So there is no comparison, and let's not worry about these things.
So let's see. Now coming to you, Syed Mohammad Ali, latest visit of Winnie Sherman. I mean, she was in Pakistan, the Assistant Secretary of State. Earlier than that, she was in India. But sir, whatever she said in India, whatever she said in Pakistan, I mean, she was very, very straightforward, and she was very focused. She said, I'm not here to improve the relationship between Pakistan and the United States of America. I mean, so perhaps she also knows, and perhaps she has been told what to do, what to say, and what not to say. And that was a very dry visit, I would say, sir. Couldn't achieve much out of that. How do you see that?
Well, I mean, what was particularly concerning about that visit was her explicit statement that there will be the times of the India-Pakistan hyphenation are long gone, right? Because if you look at sort of the history of sort of American engagements, right? Like despite NATO, sort of SEATO and CENTO, and India leaning a bit towards Russia, but the US was also simultaneously wooing India. So and it tried to play a sort of mediation role. I mean, it applied sanctions, etc., like around the wars in the region, and was very cognizant of how it dealt with both Pakistan and India in a way that it shouldn't inflame right sort of insecurities on the other side. And that is what became concerning for Pakistan, that from that relationship, right, I mean, the US decided to decouple Indo-Pak relationship and hyphenate Pakistan with Afghanistan, which Pakistan felt was a step down. It was insensitive to Pakistan's regional insecurities, and there's, since that time, we are trying to have an independent relationship with the US it's now embarked on with India, right? But there is that convergence when it comes to using India, whether it's going to work or not, time will tell. But to try and use them to counterbalance Chinese influence, right? And I mean, even with CPEC, several years ago, actually, the Americans were kind of relieved, and I've sort of heard this from the horse's mouth, and they were not wary of CPEC initially. But soon thereafter, when we saw sort of it becoming the flagship of the BRI, with increasing sort of animosity between the US and China, we have seen America becoming increasingly suspicious of BRI, and the sort of Alice Wells called it sort of another example of predatory lending, etc. But one important point I'd like to make with CPEC, having done research on it for the past 6 months, is that for CPEC to succeed, we do need, now, if you look at the SEZs, the special economic zones, I mean, we do need to attract more foreign investment, because the way CPEC is envisioned, it has provided us loans to build our infrastructure. It's provided us loans that no one else was willing to provide Pakistan, given the security situation and everything else. And China has done that, but these are loans, right? And yes, we have roads. Yes, we have a deep sea port, and I mean, that creates us, it gives us a place as a regional hub for trade. But now we need to harness that potential, right? I mean, Pakistan is also trying to talk to the US and to Europe to bring in those investments to activate the potential of the SEZs, because we'd announced them by the dozens. But if you look on the ground, you don't see many functional SEZs at the moment. So my point is that even with CPEC, China is not going to do it all. Yes, China will try to, move in, but for any state, it's wise not to place all your eggs in one basket. So yes, it's been a contentious relationship with the US, and power and politics and geostrategy. I mean, these are complex issues. But but we need to see sort of articulation of tangible, practical, realistic sort of opportunities and building blocks for a broader relationship, because we will not have there's no top-down incentive at the moment to offer like a kind of a very generous package to Pakistan. I don't see that happening, at least from what I hear in DC.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for your time. It was a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time as well. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.